In January of 1991, a story came out of Channelview, Texas that sounded almost too strange to be real. A mother had been arrested in connection with an alleged murder-for-hire plot. Not over drugs, not over money, not over an affair, a business deal, or some type of inheritance. According to investigators, the target was another mom and her daughter. The motive was a junior high cheerleading squad. The woman at the center of it all was Wanda Holloway, a 36-year-old mother from a Houston area town where football mattered, cheerleading mattered, reputation mattered, and the line between your child's success and your own pride could get dangerously thin. It was the kind of case that the media could not resist. A Texas mother, a cheerleading rivalry, a supposed hitman, a daughter caught in the middle, and a nickname that would follow Wanda Holloway for the rest of her life, the Pom-Pom Mom. Welcome to the Southern Blueprint Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Swift. On this episode, we're going to Channelview, Texas, to tell the story of Wanda Holloway, the cheerleader murder plot, and the case that turned one mother's obsession into one of the strangest true crime stories of the 1990s. Before we get started, if you enjoy what we're doing here on the Southern Blueprint Podcast and want to support the show, there are a few ways to help us keep this thing going. First, make sure you're following and subscribed wherever you listen to the podcast. The ratings, reviews, the shares, all of that really does help people discover the show. If you want to also support us directly, you could do so through our Patreon, and it is called the Hidden Pond Lodge. That's where we post bonus content, companion posts, behind-the-scenes material, extra research, book discussions, travel ideas. You get Discord access and a lot more. We've also got our book club running every month, and we also have our bird club in there. Of course, I mentioned Discord. That's where everybody kind of hangs out. It's kind of like Microsoft Teams and Slack, but not horrible work-related stuff. It's more about bourbon, cigars, books, fly fishing, hiking, folklore, history, treasure hunting, and gardening. We have a gardening channel, and that's actually one of our more popular channels in there. But anyway, I digress. Thank you for your support, though. You could do so by giving us a 5-star rating, and also head over to Patreon and join our little community. It's kind of fun. But now, let's head back to Texas. Channelview, Texas sits east of Houston, close enough to feel the pull of the city, but culturally and economically shaped by a different world. This was refinery country, blue-collar Texas, the kind of place where families were tied to work, church, school, and more importantly, Friday night football. Football was not simply a game. It was one of the places where the community gathered to see itself. The players were not just teenagers in helmets. They were local representatives of pride, toughness, and identity. Around them, in the lights and noise of the stadium, were the other performers in this ritual. The band, the drill team, the baton twirlers, and the cheerleaders. For girls growing up in that world, those roles could carry real social weight. Being on the field meant visibility. It meant popularity. It meant belonging to something everyone recognized. it meant being seen. Wanda Webb was born in 1954 and grew up in that environment. Her father worked at the local cement plant, and her mother worked at the cafeteria at Channelview High School. The church was a big part of their lives. The family belonged to the working world of Channelview, where a person's future often looked a lot like the lives of the adults around them. Wanda wanted to be part of the high school drill team or the cheerleading squad. But Wanda's father, he objected. He thought the uniforms were too revealing. And that was enough to end that possibility. So Wanda did not get that chance. She had to watch from the side. And that image of Wanda watching from the side stays with this whole entire story. It must have been tough for Wanda having to sit and watch and be denied by her conservative father. Being on the drill team or on the cheerleading squad, that was status, and she really wanted to be on that field on Friday nights. But while in high school, Wanda met Terry Harper, who was a high school senior, and his family lived nearby. Like Wanda's family, the Harpers were super conservative and were part of the Channelview community, but they appeared to have a little more money. They were a little more better off financially. That difference may have shaped how Wanda saw Tony and the life that he represented. You know, Wanda growing up, they weren't poor, but they didn't have a lot of money. Wanda graduated in 1972, and then 2 weeks later, at the age of 18 years old, Wanda married Terry Harper. For Wanda, it may have looked like a step forward into adulthood, security, and a more established life. 13 months after the wedding, Wanda and Tony had their first child, a son named Anthony Shane. Their daughter, Shanna, would follow in 1977. From the outside, it had the shape of a conventional young marriage, high school sweethearts, a house, family dinners, and a future that seemed to be forming along familiar lines, just like their parents and the parents before them. Inside the marriage, though, according to later accounts, there were problems almost from the very beginning. Tony reportedly became frustrated by Wanda's continued deference to her father. Wanda's father had been a big controlling presence in her early life and even into marriage. Wanda still seemed to weigh her father's opinion heavily. For a young husband trying to establish his own household, that dynamic could become suffocating and frustrating. And from Wanda's and even their daughter Shanna's later perspective, Tony really did like control. There were also difficulties in the couple's intimate life. Tony later described Wanda as sexually reserved. It seems Wanda just didn't really like sex, and accounts of their marriage often point to the influence of her, strict religious upbringing. Whether that was the full explanation or only part of it, the issue became a source of strain. And at some point, Tony had an affair. When Wanda found out, she confronted the other woman and threatened her with a gun. Tony was able to calm the situation, but the marriage was already breaking apart. When Tony later returned home, his clothes had been packed and placed in the garage. The locks had been changed. In 1980, the divorce became final. Wanda was 26 years old. She kept the house and received custody of Shane and Shanna. Tony had visitations, but day-to-day life with the children belonged mostly to Wanda. And the divorce created a new version of Wanda. She went to work. She earned her own money. She was making the decisions. She was managing the household. She was deciding how money would be spent. And Wanda liked presentation. She took care of her clothes, her nails, her hair, and the image that she presented to the world. Wanda was always fixed up and looked, immaculate. Her appearance became something controlled and deliberate, and that same care and control extended to Shanna. Now, Shane, the son, you won't hear much of him in this story, but Shane was encouraged in, sports, but Shanna was encouraged in the kinds of activities that matched Wanda's idea of feminine polish and social achievement, which was, of course, dance, gymnastics, and eventually cheerleading. And this is where the story begins moving toward the thing that would later consume Wanda. At Shane's Little League games, Wanda volunteered Shanna for the mini cheerleading group. Shanna was very young, but the direction was already being set. Wanda had not been allowed on the field in the way that she once wanted. Shanna would not be left on the sidelines. Wanda would do anything she needed to do to make sure Shanna succeeded. After the divorce from Tony, Wanda's life stabilized, but it was not really the life she seemed to want forever. She was working, she was raising 2 children, she had her own home and her own routine, but financially she was not as secure as she had been during her marriage. Then she met Gordon Englehart. Gordon was 20 years older than Wanda, successful and connected to the oil business. He lived in Beaumont, about 80 miles away from Channelview. He had money. He took Wanda to nice restaurants. He gave her a glimpse of a life that was more comfortable, more polished, and more removed from the place she had always known. He also gave her a new Mazda RX-7. For a young divorced mother in the early 1980s, that kind of gift was not minor. It suggested, freedom, style, and maybe some upward movement. It was a physical symbol of life Wanda seemed to be, kind of reaching towards. In 1981, Wanda married Gordon. She was 27. She packed up her children and left Channelview for Beaumont. For a time, Beaumont gave Wanda what she wanted. Gordon's money allowed her to stop working. She became a stay-at-home mother again. There were the clothes, jewelry, restaurants, and a more comfortable domestic life. After the instability of divorce and single parenthood, Wanda had stepped into a world that seemed to offer status and a little more ease. But this marriage, too, did not last. Less than 2 years later, Gordon's business suffered during a downturn in the oil industry. Around the same time, his elderly mother moved into the home. The life Wanda had imagined began changing into something she had not agreed to. So she began making plans to return to Channelview. Behind Gordon's back, she arranged for Shane and Shanna to transfer back into school there. When Gordon discovered what was happening, Wanda told him that the marriage was just not working. Then she left. She took her 2 children, the jewelry, and the car Gordon had given her, and she drove back to Channelview. But I want to say something here because I always want to be very truthful with you guys. What I just told you about Gordon in this second marriage, I could only find this information from really two different sources. One was a People magazine article that specifically talked about this and this second marriage. The other was a podcast that goes kind of deeper into this relationship and everything like that. But if you Google Wanda and you look up her marriages, it does not list Gordon at all. Now, I don't know if that's because it only lasted for not even 2 years. And it really is not like a huge part of the story, but I just want to be upfront with you all about this segment. Everything else that's in this episode is going to be well documented. You can look all of this up, but I just want to throw that out there that this section, I could only find it in two different sources. But anyway, I digress. Let's get back to the episode. Whether the whole marriage to Gordon happened or not, I guess in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter all that much. But what we do know is that Wanda enrolled Shane and Shanna into Channelview Christian Academy. The children were raised with church, school, and extracurricular activities braided together. Shane played sports, joined the school band, and took piano. Shanna took piano as well, but her path moved more deeply into, you guessed it, dance, gymnastics. Wanda loved both of her children, but by many accounts, Shanna occupied a special place in Wanda's life. She was not just her daughter, she was her companion, her project, and in many ways, her mirror. Wanda showed up at Shanna's activities. She watched practices, she watched performances, she studied other children and paid attention who was improving, who was ahead, and kind of where Shanna stood in all of this. During those years, Wanda became connected to another mother in that same orbit, and that woman's name was Verna Heath. Verna's daughter, Amber, was the same age as Shanna. The girls had overlapping interests. They were both involved in the kinds of activities that often fed into cheerleading, like I mentioned, dance and gymnastics. Wanda and Verna were mothers in the same community, managing schedules, practices, school demands, and family life. They helped each other when needed. There were carpools, there were favors, there was the ordinary cooperation that happens between parents whose children move through the same, worlds. That seemingly ordinary relationship would later become one of the strangest and darkest parts of the story. By the mid-1980s, Wanda was really kind of looking for stability, status, and a more secure future. And again, she had 2 kids to look after. In 1986, she met C.D. Holloway at church. C.D. was a choir master, and Wanda played the organ there. C.D. was older than Wanda, and he was connected to the oil business. And C.D. came from a family with money. For Wanda, that world probably looked appealing. C.D. represented not merely romance, but security for her and her 2 kids. They end up marrying the same year that they met. It was Wanda's either second marriage, or if we believe the marriage to Gordon, it could have been her third marriage. Either way, second or third, this marriage, the wedding was, kind of understated. But Wanda she moved forward. She decorated the house. She managed the household. She worked on her wardrobe. And increasingly, she focused more and more and more on Shanna. Shanna was taking dance and gymnastics, and Wanda became more than supportive. She became involved at a level that other people really kind of noticed. Verna Heath also noticed it. Amber Heath, Verna's daughter, was in the same gymnastics world, like I said, and Wanda reportedly really watched Amber closely. And Amber became a measuring stick. If Amber could do something Shanna could not, Wanda wanted to know why. If Shanna was behind, Wanda pushed Shanna harder. At home, Wanda created a practice space in the garage, complete with mirrors and lighting. The garage became a kind of private training room where Shanna could rehearse, repeat, and improve, and basically work out day in and day out. The work did not stop at ordinary practice. Wanda sometimes helped so aggressively that schoolwork became secondary. Shanna's assignments could be pushed aside or even completed by Wanda herself, so Shanna would have more time to practice. The goal was becoming crystal clear. Shanna was going to make cheerleader, not simply because she wanted it, but really because it seemed like Wanda needed it. And here I want to say something. I do think that Wanda needed it, wanted it. I try my best not to inject my personal opinions. I tried to just tell the story without giving my personal bias, but it's probably not why you were listening. You're here to listen to the story. But as I'm doing research for the show, I'm reading articles, listening to other podcasts, and I watched a documentary that I'll go into more later, but some of this rubs me the wrong way. A lot of the narrative is, oh, Wanda was just doing everything she could for her kid, and almost at times giving Wanda kind of a pass on her actions. Some of these podcast shows and the documentary leave out the kind of the multiple marriages, and again painted as just an overly loving parent doing the best they can for their kid. I don't know. It just, like I said, it just rubs me the wrong way. I've seen so many parents try to live vicariously through their kid, and I just always think it's truly absurd. But I don't know. I'll come back to the documentary that I mentioned later for sure. It's a pretty great documentary, all things considered. But again, parts of it really kind of irked me a little bit. But I'll come back to that. But in 1988, at the end of 5th grade, Wanda moved Shanna out of Channelview Christian Academy and into the public school system. The reason was strategic. To be eligible for the 7th grade cheerleading squad at Alice Johnson Junior High, girls had to try out in 6th grade. If Shanna stayed at Channelview Christian, she would miss the window, so Wanda moved her. So yeah, again, if I can interject here, keep in mind that we are talking about 7th grade cheerleading. That's not knocking cheerleading. I'm just saying, as we're judging, not judging, this is all over 7th grade cheerleading. Anyways, Amber Heath stayed at Channelview Christian, which may have seemed like one less obstacle, as there was only a certain amount of spots open for the cheerleading squad. So Shanna had moved into the public school. Her, friend, yet, maybe kind of competitor rival, had stayed at Channelview Christian. So, okay, that's one less thing to have to worry about. There's only a certain amount of spots, and all that's great. But that did not last. Halfway through the school year, Verna Heath contacted Alice Johnson Junior High and told the school Amber would be joining the following year. Verna asked for some leeway and to somewhat, I guess, bend the rules a little bit. Again, it's 7th grade cheerleading. Anyway, since Amber would be part of the incoming student body, the school allowed her to, yeah, okay, you're fine. Good, you can try out. But suddenly, the rival Wanda may have thought was kind of out of the way was now back in front of Shanna. The cheerleading tryouts at Alice Johnson Junior High was not decided by talent alone. Oh no. The girls performed in front of a panel of college cheerleaders and the student body. That's got to be pretty nerve-wracking. The panel selected finalists, and after that, the final decision came down to a student vote. That meant cheerleading was partly performance and partly politics. What could possibly go wrong? The finalists had to literally campaign. They handed out flyers and made posters, and they tried to win over classmates. In the world of middle school, that turned the tryout into something more complicated than just gymnastics and team spirit. It became a popularity contest. And popularity at that age, as we know, can be pretty brutal. It's not always about who worked the hardest. It's not always about who wanted it the most. Sometimes it's just about who is already known, who is already liked, who has the right friends, and who can turn that attention into votes. For Wanda, that system must have been maddening. And Wanda was also really pissed off because the school had bent the rules to let Amber in. Hard work was supposed to pay off, right? Preparation was supposed to pay off. Practice in the garage, extra hours, polished appearances, parental effort. All of that was supposed to lead somewhere, right? But Shanna could work and still lose because another girl was more popular. When the tryout day came, Wanda Holloway, Verna Heath, and the other mothers sat in the stands and watched their daughters perform. Both Shanna and Amber made the finalist group. And from there, it went to the vote. Amber had an edge athletically. She could do more complicated tumbling, and by the accounts of everything that existed, she performed better. Amber was just, she was just better. But once the finalists were chosen, performance was only part of the equation. The girls campaigned in the halls, and Amber and Verna Heath used a clever tactic. They handed out Heath candy bars. It's actually pretty smart. It was almost too perfect, right? Amber's last name was already printed on the wrapper. Every candy bar became a little advertisement. For middle school students, sugar and name recognition made a powerful combination. For Wanda, it probably kind of looked like another unfair advantage, another obstacle, another sign that the system was not rewarding what she believed Shanna had earned. Shanna had done well at tryouts. She had made it into the finalist group, which meant the judges saw at least enough talent, preparation, and performance ability to put her in the running of things. But once the finalists were chosen, the decision moved out of the hands of the judges and into the hands of the student body, which again, why this is the way this is, I don't know. But it is what it is. Amber Heath made the squad. Shanna did not. For Shanna, it was disappointment. But for Wanda, it appears to have become something much larger. A rejection, a humiliation, a reminder of being left on the sidelines, and the beginning of a grievance that would eventually pull in two families, the police, the courts, and the national media. The first cheerleading loss or failure was not the end of this. If anything, it appears to have hardened Wanda's resolve. Because Shanna had not just missed the squad, she had lost to Amber Heath, the girl Wanda had been measuring her against. The girl whose mother had managed to get her into the tryout process, even though Amber had not originally transferred out of Channelview Christian when Shanna did. To Wanda, that seemed to have felt less like competition and more like interference. And this is where the story begins to move away from a disappointed parent and towards something much more troubling. Because most parents, even the difficult ones, even the overbearing ones, they have a breaking point where reality settles in. The kid does not make the team. The kid does not get the part. The kid does not win the award. You're disappointed. Maybe you complain. Maybe you think the system, was unfair. Maybe you mutter about politics, popularity, favoritism, and gripe about other parents. Then eventually, you move on. And again, not to knock cheerleading, because this happens in all sports, really. But we're talking about 7th grade cheerleading here. 7th grade cheerleading. Wanda, she did not move on. Instead, the next year became another campaign. Now we're talking about 8th grade cheerleading. Again, this is middle school cheerleading. Just want to keep reiterating that. Shanna is now, into the 8th grade and trying to get into the cheerleading world Wanda really wanted Shanna to get into. And Wanda, having watched one attempt in badly, came into the next round. She was more prepared, more aggressive, and less willing to let chance decide the outcome. There were also more spots available on the squad this time, which also helped Shanna's chances. The tryout process still included a student vote. Again, why? And Wanda appears to have understood very clearly what that meant. If cheerleading was partly popularity, then popularity could be manufactured. If students had to remember your daughter's name, then you gave them reasons to remember it. So Wanda prepared campaign materials. And Wanda took inspiration from what the Heaths had done the year before. If the system rewarded campaigning, then Shanna would campaign. If votes could be influenced by name recognition, then Wanda would make sure Shanna's name was everywhere. If popularity had to be built, bought, shaped, or manufactured, whatever, then that was exactly what Wanda intended to do. But after the 1989 tryouts, the school changed the rules. The basic structure remained the same. The girls would perform in front of the school and a panel of college cheerleaders. The judges would select the finalist. After that, the finalists would, campaign and the student body would vote. But the campaign itself had been restricted, the school limited the number of posters each girl could hang in the hallway. More importantly, it banned the candy bar tactic. No more handing out candy to win votes. So when that door closed, Wanda found another one. She apparently did not see anything in the rules that banned other kinds of handouts. Candy was forbidden, right? But what about something practical? Something students could actually use, something that that would keep Shanna's name in front of them. So Wanda had pencils, rulers, and other items made with Shanna's name on them. The idea was simple: put Shanna's name in front of the voters, hand out something useful, make her visible, make her memorable, make her impossible to ignore, and more importantly, make this girl a cheerleader. My goodness. With tryouts approaching, Wanda believed everything was finally in place. This time, Shanna would not be outmaneuvered. This time, she would not lose because the other side campaigned harder. This time, Wanda would make sure her daughter had every possible advantage. Once again, the day of tryouts arrived. Wanda sat in the bleachers with the other mothers, watching Shanna and the rest of the girls perform. And once again, Shanna made the finalist group. The preparation had worked. The judges had chosen Shanna again. She was still in the running. Now came the final hurdle. Before the voting began, the parents of the finalists were called into a meeting to review the election rules. Wanda asked about the pencils and rulers. And, they were not candy after all. They were school supplies. But the school officials told her no. Any gifts this time were forbidden. That meant the pencils and the rulers could not be handed out. Wanda was frustrated, of course. She'd already paid for them. The items had already been made. The whole strategy had been built around getting Shanna's name into the hands of voters. And now that plan also had been shut down before it even started. But Wanda adjusted. Wanda and Shanna made flyers shaped like cheerleading megaphones. They decorated them with glitter and put Shanna's name on them. They were bright, handmade, attention-grabbing, the kind of thing that made, that might stand out in a school hallway during a campaign. But then Wanda realized that she didn't have enough wooden paint stirrers to use as the handles for the megaphone flyers. Now, these are not being handed out, they're being hung up. So just want to clarify that. You couldn't hand out anything this time, but you could hang up flyers and things like that. So they had made all these megaphones, put them up, but now Wanda had realized she didn't have enough wooden paint stirrers. So instead of just going to go get more, she improvised. She used some of the custom rulers with Shanna's name on them instead. Not all of them, just some. Around 15 or so of the megaphone flyers were attached to the rulers painted with Shanna's campaign message. The next morning, Shanna arrived at school with these colorful megaphone flyers. They put them up. And soon someone noticed the rulers. A meeting was called. Of course it was. The school's vice principal and assistant superintendent for Channelview and the cheerleading coach became involved because, yes, why not? This is all very serious matter. The coach had spoken with the other mothers connected to the competition, and after reviewing what happened, the school made its decision. Wanda and Shanna were called into the office the following morning, behind closed doors, that they were told that the rules had been violated. The rulers counted as a forbidden campaign item. So Shanna was disqualified. For Shanna, of course, it was devastating and probably a little embarrassing For Wanda, it was something else entirely. Supposedly, she sat in the principal's office and just sobbed. And to her credit, at least in the moment, Wanda reportedly took blame. She said it was her mistake. She said she had been responsible for the rulers. It wasn't Shanna. Shanna didn't have anything to do with that. But the school would just not reverse the decision. The ruling stood. And for the second year in a row, Wanda's dream of seeing Shanna become a cheerleader had collapsed. The first time, Shanna had lost the vote. The second time, she didn't even get to finish the process. She was disqualified. Now, the first year, there weren't that many spots available. Now, for 8th grade, there was actually quite a bit of spots remaining. So if she was a finalist, she had a really good chance of actually making the team if Wanda would have just, act like a normal human being. Anyway, but from Wanda's perspective, though, there was one person standing at the center of both disappointments from 7th grade and the 8th grade endeavors. And that one person was Verna Heath. Verna had been present in the meeting with the other mothers to discuss the rules and everything like that. The school had looked at the campaign materials, the rulers that had been deemed a violation. Shanna had been disqualified, and somewhere inside all of that, Wanda appears to have decided that Verna Heath had not simply followed the rules or protected her own daughter's interest. Wanda believed Verna had worked against Shanna and Wanda. Before long, Wanda was telling people that Verna had conspired against her. The other cheerleading mothers, in Wanda's telling, had not merely raised concerns about the campaign materials. They had plotted. They had worked together. They had found a way to keep Shanna off the squad. It became, in Wanda's mind, something larger than a school decision. It became personal. It became intentional. It became proof that someone else was standing between Shanna and the future Wanda believed Shanna deserved. But of course, there's no solid evidence that Verna Heath or Amber Heath had done anything sinister. Verna was another mother in the same school world trying to help her own daughter succeed. Amber was a young girl who performed well, campaigned well, and earned a place in the squad. Neither of them appears to have been engaged in some grand effort to destroy Shanna Harper. But Wanda no longer seemed capable of seeing the situation that plainly. Her disappointment had sharpened into suspicion, and suspicion had begun turning into something much darker. And the more Wanda replayed it, the more Verna and Amber became fixed in her mind as the reason. Wanda was not a hardened criminal. She was she's a Christian, right? She was not someone with obvious connections to professional violence. She was a church-going middle-class mother in Channelview, a woman whose world revolved around her home, her appearance, and her daughter's activities and the social structure of her community. This is a pillar of the community, right? If she wanted someone harmed, per se, she was not going to do it herself. She would need someone else. Someone who knew a rougher world. Someone who might know people willing to do things that ordinary people only talked about in whispers. There was one person who came to mind, and that was Terry Harper. Terry was the younger brother of Wanda's ex-husband, Tony Harper, which is Shanna's dad. Now, a little bit ago I said I called Shanna by her last name, Shanna Harper. Hopefully that didn't throw you off. Shanna was not called Wanda Holloway. She was called Shanna Harper. She had kept her, her dad's name. But anyway, Terry was the younger brother of Wanda's ex-husband, Tony Harper. And that made him Wanda's former brother-in-law, which already made this part of the story feel strange and a little uncomfortable. She was not reaching out to someone anonymous. She was reaching back into the extended family she had once married into. Terry Harper had a reputation very different than Wanda's. He had been around drugs and alcohol from a very young age, and by his mid-30s, he had accumulated a criminal record, multiple marriages. I think when I was looking at it, he'd been married like 6 or 7 times, and had enough connection to Channelview's rougher edges that, Wanda apparently believed he might know how to find the right person that she was looking for. Wanda had not seen Terry in years, but in the fall of 1990, she went looking for him. She drove to the trailer park where he lived and pulled up outside his double wide. She did not go to the door. She sat in the car and honked the horn, waiting for Terry to come out, and eventually Terry appeared. From the car, Wanda told him she needed to talk, but not here. She wanted him to come with her to meet somewhere else, away from the trailer park, away from anyone who might overhear. And from that point forward, Terry Harper would become one of the most important and most controversial figures in the entire case. And I say this because, depending on who is telling the story, Terry is either the man who stopped a murder before it happened, or it's the man who helped build a case against Wanda Holloway, kind of driving her deeper into conversations that she really didn't want to have and maybe entrapping her. Anyway, I have some personal issues with the story that I will elaborate on later. And I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but the defense team would later paint an uglier picture of Terry. To Wanda's attorneys, Terry was not some noble citizen. He was an unreliable former in-law with a messy past, a man connected to Wanda's ex-husband, Tony, and someone who may have had reasons to help the Harper side of the family damage Wanda. The defense would argue that Wanda had been set up, she'd been manipulated, or pushed into saying things she did not truly intend to carry out. But before any of that reached a courtroom, before television cameras turned Wanda Holloway into the Pom-Pom Mom, there was this first approach by Wanda to Terry Harper. Perplexed but curious, Terry decided to meet Wanda at a nearby convenience store. Wanda had pulled up, asked Terry to go talk. He was like, "Oh, okay, this is interesting." Minutes later, Terry parked next to Wanda's vehicle, and he jumped out and got into her passenger seat. Wanda first warned Terry that this meeting never happened. Then she asked him how much he loved his niece, Shanna. Then Wanda went into all of her grievances about Verna and Amber Heath. Wanda was talking about taking the Heaths out of the equation and getting rid of them. Terry told Wanda that he'd actually been trying to clean up his act recently. He was on probation for drunk driving, and he wanted nothing to do with whatever scheme Wanda was proposing. Even if he had wanted to help, he reasoned, he didn't know anyone who could carry out something that she was insinuating here. But Wanda kept going. Wanda was like, Verna and Amber Heath were ruining her life. They were ruining Shanna's life. Something had to be done about these two. Terry, not sure what else to say, was like, oh yeah, all right. He threw out a dollar amount that it would take to take care of Verna and Amber. Wanting to get out of the conversation as quickly as possible, Terry told Wanda, "Yeah, okay, I'll look into it." He gave her some dollar amount that might take care of it. He's like, "Okay, I'll try to see if I can find somebody that can take care of your issue here." As he drove away from the parking lot that afternoon, he supposedly was hoping that this entire bizarre conversation was over, but it wasn't. And at this point, you can sit here and say, he said, she said, he said, she said, Wanda is a nice church-going lady. Terry Harper is literally the exact opposite. He's got a criminal record. He's been married numerous times. He's always in trouble. He's literally on probation as Wanda is talking to him. So at this point in the story, you could say it's he said, she said, but that changes with kind of these next steps and these next actions. A couple of months later, during a Harper family Christmas gathering, Shanna quietly approached Terry and handed him a small piece of paper with a phone number written on it. Wanda had sent Shanna to this family gathering with this piece of paper with Wanda's phone number on it and wanted Terry to call her. Now, Shanna, of course, is still a Harper. She's going to go see her dad's side of the family. Wanda, of course, did not go. But Wanda gave Shanna this piece of paper with her phone number and said she wanted Terry to call her. Now, I want to come back to this part of the story later because, one, we've now moved from he said, she said, and now we're moving into intent, right? And again, there's parts of the story that like rubs me the wrong way, but this part specifically, Shanna is involved. And later, Shanna lies about this, and I'll come back to this. But anyways, Terry didn't know exactly what to do now. Wanda had reached out to him, had that weird conversation. Now Wanda is sending Shanna to give Terry this phone number. He's like, okay, I need to tell Shanna's dad about this whole situation. So Terry goes to Tony, like, hey, here's the deal. And Tony's like, okay. So a few days later, Terry and Tony, they go and reach out to the authorities. Terry met with law enforcement and gave them a statement detailing Wanda's alleged murder plot, basically. She wanted Verna and Amber taken care of. Now, you can insinuate that however you want, but either way, murder plot or hurting, whatever the case is, Wanda wanted something done to these two. Law enforcement wasn't too sure about the whole thing. I'm sure they were probably very familiar with Terry. But they said, okay, all right, why don't you call Wanda now and we'll just listen in. And they recorded the conversation, and sure enough, Wanda starts implicating herself. And detectives had Terry meet with Wanda again, but then this time wear a wire. So during this meeting, Terry said he had found someone to do the job that Wanda was wanting, and it would cost $7,500 to take out both Verna and Amber Heath. Wanda said, and this is all verifiable in her own voice, recorded, she said, that's for both? Terry said, yeah, it's $5,000 for the girl being Amber Heath, and $2,500 for the mother, Verna. Wanda says, on record, in her own voice, that's recorded, she says, the mother ain't worth crap, is she? Yeah, okay. Wanda then says, maybe I should just go with the mother. The kid, maybe she would be screwed up enough if, something happened to the mother, and it would be a mess, and, it would mess with her mind. Again, this is Wanda saying all of this on record. Terry said that he would need half down, though. He would need a down payment for this before the deed was done. But Wanda wasn't sure how to get the money. And again, she was just going to take out Verna for $2,500. But Wanda wasn't sure, she had money, but, how are you going to get cash like that and explain that away to your husband or anyone else? But anyway, law enforcement was worried she would maybe back out of this deal as she's trying to find the money and maybe go somewhere else for this hit. So law enforcement was, they told Terry, instead of money, maybe Wanda could give him something of an item that's something of equal value. And Wanda said, yeah, okay, I've got something. I've got diamond earrings. So Wanda and Terry met again, and she gave him those diamond earrings as payment or as a down payment to take out Verna Heath. The next day, Wanda is arrested at her home. The arrest sparked a firestorm and national news coverage. Dubbed the Pom-Pom Mom, everyone knew about Wanda Holloway. I mean, this is just perfect, made-for-TV type stuff. Shanna said she was chased by the media, and Shanna had found out that one of her classmates and friends was selling yearbook photos to the media. It was a sensational and a massive story. Wanda got out on a $10,000 bond and awaited trial, where she could be facing life in prison. Now, there was a documentary about this case that came out in 2024 called The Texas Cheerleader Murder Plot. Shanna, she's grown, completely grown now. Shanna was front and center and wanted to do this documentary. And she recalls the whole story, according to her, and recounts the arrest, which I'm sure was traumatic. And Shanna said she felt responsible in a way. If she had just made the cheerleading squad, like none of this would have happened. And to me, again, I said some of this irked me, and this is part of it. This documentary was part of that. To me, that her saying that's a ton of personal guilt. And I guess I really have a pet peeve of parents being overbearing. And I've made, I'm not joking about cheerleading. And again, I want to make that very clear. If this was basketball or 7th and 8th grade soccer, I would still be rolling my eyes about this. I just think some parents are just absolutely ridiculous, and Wanda here has even taken it to a different level. But in this documentary, Shanna first kind of blames herself, and then it sort of shifts. And I've got some personal feelings about it. And some of that comes from this documentary, like I was saying. But after Wanda's arrest, Tony Harper goes on Larry King and gives his thoughts on the matter. And he immediately got a lawyer and tried to get full custody of Shane and Shanna away from Wanda. Shanna says in the documentary that she wasn't comfortable with her dad. She feared him. So that made the whole dynamic strange and even worse. So the trial started, and the prosecution's star witness was, of course, Terry Harper, whom Wanda had solicited. One of the jurors would later say that he didn't think Terry was a nice guy. And all the things that I've kind of read about, and no, he really probably wasn't. And the fact that he wasn't a nice guy, that was brought right out in front of everybody. They really went into his checkered past. But he told how Wanda had sought him out, and then how he recorded Wanda asking him to find a hitman. And the courtroom, the jurors, everybody, they listened to the tapes. And there were a lot of them. And it was Wanda's own voice. Wanda, on tape, said she could not stand that woman being Verna. And she said, I don't care what you do to her. You can keep her in Cuba for 15 years. I want her gone. There was countless other things similar to this. In Wanda's own words. The defense tried to paint the picture that, of course, Terry was a vile person. They called Marla Harper to the stand, Terry's, at the time, estranged wife, to tell the jury how Terry had abused Marla, how violent he was, and how afraid she was of him. Marla then said that she knew all about the situation with Wanda, and that it was a setup, that there was something fishy about it, a plot, so to speak, to frame Wanda. Marla wrote a letter to Terry, and that letter became evidence. And in that letter, Marla was leaving Terry, and she goes on to say how Terry lied to the police about Wanda, and how Terry and Tony were conspiring to get Wanda in trouble, and how after Wanda gave Terry her number to call him, Terry and Tony set this whole plan in motion to get the kids back. Because again, Wanda had custody of the two kids, and supposedly this was all a big ploy to get the kids back. Anyway, the defense attorney then tried to show how on the tape recordings, Terry was, quote unquote, forcing Wanda to go through with it. I guess just totally disregarding the fact that it was Wanda who sought Terry out first, and it was Wanda who sent a note with Shanna for Terry to call her. And also saying things like, maybe I should go with the mother, and the kid would be screwed in the head, if something happened to Verna. Things like that. I guess we're gonna totally disregard those things. Anyway, Shanna in that documentary I mentioned says flat out she thinks her uncle Terry and her dad Tony set Wanda up. She says that her dad had a really good, quote unquote, opportunity to nail it to her really hard. And I have some strong feelings about this, but Tony was having to pay for child support, and I guess this is a way to get out of it, I suppose. And Shanna says her dad got off on power trips. I mentioned that earlier. Clearly, their relationship was not great, and I totally understand that. Seems like Shanna was, caught between a dad she really didn't get along with, and then Wanda, who to me seems batshit insane, but that's just my own personal opinion. Shanna said that she thought her dad saw an unfortunate situation and played it to his advantage. And maybe he did, but good grief. I have a hard time hearing what she's saying on this documentary, knowing what the tapes say and knowing what the evidence says, and just, again, with the documentary. And then I've even heard folks on some other podcast episodes just saying like, oh, Wanda was just doing what she can, what she could for her kid, and Tony's a piece of crap, and her dad sucks, blah blah blah. And I'm just like, it still does not change the fact that Wanda was trying to get rid of a mother and a teenage girl. But back to Marla, who was Terry's estranged wife. The prosecution attorneys ripped Marla apart, showing that she had a history of mental illness and was in and out of hospitals, and that she herself had told doctors that she had problems distinguishing fact and fiction. So it really didn't help things there on the defense side. Then Wanda took the stand. And of course, she denied everything and said that she went along with the scheme because she was scared of Terry. Now, again, she sought out Terry twice, basically. Anyway, as Wanda listened to her own voice on the tape, she said she was just kidding and going along with Terry. Okay. But hearing the tapes, it's hard to argue that she was kidding. The jury also had a hard time thinking she was kidding. After hearing the facts and both sides' arguments, the jury deliberated around 6 hours and came back with a guilty verdict. And Wanda could get 15 years in jail for solicitation of capital murder. However, things were not over. One of the jurors was not even supposed to be in the jury. He should have been disqualified, as the juror was currently on probation. It was a different type of probation, and this person didn't realize that they were actually on probation, whatever. And that's a big no-no. So Miss Wanda, she gets a new trial. Shanna said in the documentary that she was relieved and said that no one was really going to get hurt. It was just words. And, the whole thing was just made to look really bad, which to me is absolutely delusional. But when Wanda got out and was in between the two trials, she was able to get her side of the story out. And boy, did she. She did interviews all over the place and told anyone that would listen, that she was set up, that things started out, innocent, and that it evolved and mushroomed, and she just didn't know how to get out of it. Wanda and Shanna went on Phil Donahue. Shanna in this documentary recounts that what it was like being on the show. Shanna said that the audience was receptive to her, but not her mom. And shockingly, the audience was like, what the hell? Why would you do this, etc. Kind of like what you're probably thinking, what I'm thinking, like, why would you do this? This sounds ridiculous. And again, it's Wanda's own voice in these tapes saying these things. But Shanna said it was intense and people were booing. And she said that Shanna thought that, they would take it easy. And since, Shanna, who's, still kind of young, sitting right next to her mom. But I'm like, you went on Phil Donahue. What did you think was going to happen? And again, it's infuriating. An audience member at some point straight up asked Shanna, did you know something was going on? since y'all are so close, and supposedly Terry was harassing Wanda and making her do all these things, Shanna sat there and said that she didn't know anything about this conspiracy or had any idea about this murder for hire plot. She didn't have a clue. But you see, Shanna was lying. And again, I will come back to that specifically. And there's some other things I said I was going to come back to. I'll button this all up, I promise. But Wanda's second trial happened 5 years later, where she pleaded no contest as her lawyer successfully negotiated a plea deal. Judge George Godwin sentenced Wanda Holloway to 10 years in prison with a fine of $10,000. On top of this, Wanda settled a civil suit filed by the Heath family. On October 2nd, 1994, Wanda agreed to pay a total of $150,000 to the victims. It was decided in court that $70,000 would be given to Verna and her husband, $30,000 to the children of Verna, and then $50,000 to cover the legal expenses in the case. But are you ready for this? Wanda was released on March 1st, 1997, after only serving just 6 months of her sentence under something called shock probation. The judge ordered her to serve the remaining 9.5 years on probation and to complete 1,000 hours of community service. Shock probation is where a judge sends an offender to prison for a short time, then releases them to serve the rest of their sentence on probation. The goal is to, quote unquote, shock the individual with the harsh reality of prison, deterring them from future crimes. If you remember back in episode 7, where I will talk about Pappygate and Toby Kurtzinger, he also was issued shock probation. Anyway, it's funny. There's some social things I could say about shock probation and who gets it and who doesn't. Anyway, Verna would also go on to say, there was justice today. I don't want Wanda to stay in jail for the rest of her life. I want her to have help, and I want her to realize that what she did was wrong. Verna is a lot better person than I am, because I'd be like, throw that lady in jail forever. If someone was trying to kill me, and more importantly, my kid, yeah, I'd probably want them to stay in jail. So if you're keeping score, Wanda served 6 months for trying to arrange a hitman to kill her daughter's rival so she could get a spot on the cheerleading squad, the 7th and 8th grade cheerleading squad. Shanna, at the end of this documentary I keep mentioning, admits that she knew more about what was going on with her mother than she claimed and straight up lied about on Donahue. I told you I'd come back to this. Shanna said Wanda, 6 weeks before she was arrested, was talking to Shanna about what if something happened to Verna and Amber and we just didn't have to deal with them anymore. Shanna is, a young teenager at the time, was like, what do you mean? And was taken aback and said, well, that would make things easier, but that's that's not okay. That's crazy. Then things went quiet, and Shanna thought that she wasn't serious. But then, if you remember the note Wanda wanted Shanna to give Terry, Shanna wasn't sure who she could even tell, but, other shows and even the documentary can say what they want to diminish things, but I feel like that's all pretty damning. Like, Shanna had that conversation with her mother, and then Shanna knew about the note with Wanda's number on it. Again, Shanna lied about all this, so I think she knew. And again, she's a teenager, and it's probably like, this is insane. I got all types of other. My mom's a little high strung, right? And I got all this other stuff to worry about. But it's the documentary is great. I highly suggest you go watch it. It's very eye-opening, but also, to me, infuriating, because Shanna kind of goes through this like, oh, my dad's a piece of crap, my uncle's crazy, this was all a setup, it's just, harmless, blah, blah, blah. But then later in the same documentary, she's like, yeah, I had a conversation with my mom. She's talking about getting rid of Verna and Amber, or wouldn't that be nice if we just didn't have to deal with them anymore? And then, hey, I did know about and can verify that my mom did give me this piece of paper with her number on it to have Terry call her. So it's interesting, to say the least. And Wanda did not want Shanna to do this documentary, but again, I would go watch this. It's great, and go listen to some other shows too. Again, especially at the beginning of the shows, a couple that I'll listen to. It's very much like, oh, Wanda's just trying to do what she can for her kid, and I get that. I have a young son, and there's definitely things that I would try to do to help him, but it sure as hell wouldn't be anything remotely like this. Today, Shanna and Wanda, they don't have the relationship that they once had. And it seems like Shanna is trying her best to get past all of that. Again, Wanda did not want Shanna to do the documentary and bring up all this old stuff up, and I'm sure she didn't. But go watch the documentary and let me know if you have the same feelings I have. Maybe, again, it's because it's one of my pet peeves of parents being just insane about their kids' sports. And I used to be a youth coach, so I know how crazy parents can be. But this is next level insanity. And for this lady to get only 6 months for trying to hire a hitman to take out a woman and her daughter, teenage daughter, is laughable and infuriating. And all over it being middle school sports. And that will do it for this episode of the Southern Blueprint Podcast. As always, thank you so much for listening. I also want to give a big thank you to my producer, Corey Insco, for helping me get these episodes together, making the show sound the way it does. I know he would not hire anyone. He would not hire a hitman. He wouldn't do anything crazy like that. He's a rational human being. As I mentioned earlier in the episode, I try not to interject my personal opinions too much when I'm covering these stories. I know most of you are here for the story itself. But, like I said, when I'm researching a case like this, I'm reading the articles, listening to other shows, watching the documentary, and just trying to sort through all the different, versions of what happened. Some things just rub me the wrong way. And maybe that came through a little bit in this episode. If it did, I apologize. I'm sure y'all don't want me adding my own thoughts and reactions, but if you do, let me know. Or if you just want me to stick to the facts, I will. Just let me know. Send me a message. Leave me a comment. If you enjoyed this episode and want to support what we're doing, please consider joining us over on Patreon. Again, it's called the Hidden Pine Lodge. It's a great way to just support the show directly. It's only $4 a month. It's literally like a cup of coffee. It just helps fund the show. And again, that gets you access to our little fun online community through Patreon, and then you get access to Discord, and you come in there and there's little chat rooms about all types of different topics. It's pretty fun. Like I said, we got our book club, we got our bird club, we got all types of fun stuff. So come join us if that sounds like your kind of place. Thank you again for tuning in, for sharing the show, for listening, and just being part of the Southern Blueprint. See you guys.